The Sannin together were present at what you could argue was the Akatsuki's inception, and as their life paths diverged, they all were killed or nearly killed by this criminal organization. When Yahiko, Nagito, and Conan first approached the Sannin, they all had different reactions to the situation at hand. Tsunade was mostly indifferent, Orochimaru wanted to put them out of their misery, and Jiraiya wanted to train them as a sort of reparation to the Rain Village. Jiraiya did not expect for one of these orphans to be the apparent second coming of the Sage of the Six Paths, nor did he anticipate them starting a criminal organization that would nearly spark a world war. Towards the end of his life, his main purpose was to monitor the Akatsuki, and eventually he died at the hand of his students. This decision to train these three random war orphans also nearly killed the other Sannin as well. Orochimaru ironically began working against his will for the war orphan he suggested killing almost off a whim. This resulted in him clashing with one of the Akatsuki's strongest members, which eventually led to his death before being revived by Sasuke in the Fourth Great Shinobi War. Tsunade went on to become the Hokage, which allowed for her to mostly deal with the Akatsuki indirectly. After causing her nation much trouble, that seemingly insignificant war orphan turned her beloved village into a crater. She was the only Sannin to never fight an Akatsuki member, but Nagito forced her to heal her village so much that she nearly died as a result. The Sannin have a long history of the Akatsuki and were mostly reactive or indirectly proactive when dealing with them. But what if the Sannin decided to put aside their differences to directly fight a common enemy? Orochimaru had already indirectly done this by not deciding to kill Team 7 when they infiltrated his hideout looking for Sasuke. He said himself he needed the Leaf Village to keep taking out Akatsuki members for him. For this scenario, we'll say that the three Sannin respect and fear the Akatsuki far more than they did originally. They'll come to believe that they are too strong for anyone else to deal with in the Leaf Village. They'll set aside their differences for the time being and begin hunting each Akatsuki duo since they believe they're the only ones capable of doing so. They have the numbers advantage in every matchup except against Pain, and they also have the advantage of having a medic on their team. The conditions for this what-if versus battle hybrid will be that the Sannin will not surprise attack, but instead confront each Akatsuki duo out somewhere in the wilderness. This will make it more fair for the Akatsuki duo, so we'll just say that both teams become aware of each other at the same time. The only win condition for the Sannin is at least one of them surviving and to defeat the Akatsuki duo in this fight. Even if everyone perishes in the fight, it would still be considered a loss for the Sannin since the rest of the Akatsuki is unchecked now. Lastly, to specify, this will be the Orochimaru that fought four-tailed Naruto but fully healthy. This is the one we know the most about and actually see fight. Plus this makes sense since the time period for this scenario is early part 2. With all that being said, I'll start off by explaining why these three shinobi are such a great team together, and then talk about how they do against the zombie duo. If you were to create a tier of shinobi that are roughly Sannin level, you likely wouldn't be able to pick three of them that would be better than this team overall. This is because of how well these three cover each other's weaknesses. Tsunade and Jiraiya are not particularly smart fighters, but Orochimaru is. Tsunade does not have the most diverse set of abilities, but Orochimaru and Jiraiya do. Jiraiya does not have much of a way of healing himself, but Tsunade does have the ability to heal him. Orochimaru's attack power is not the highlight of his arsenal, but Tsunade and Jiraiya can make up for that. On top of all of this, you have a medic on this team, and at least a war's worth of experience together. This is as complete as a team of three can be compared to their power level. So to start off, how do they do against something as durable as a zombie duo? While we sadly don't know how the Sannin work together in a fight, we do know how Hidan and Kakuzu do. We can expect for the game plan to be Hidan running around pestering the Sannin, while Kakuzu's mask assists them by firing a mutually assured attack. While this isn't some type of attack that is going to instantly defeat someone, it is one that is hard to deal with and can quickly wear you down. Kakashi was quickly roughed up by it, and Shikamaru boldly elected to take Hidan one-on-one instead of fighting team-on-team. The problem is that this is a terrible matchup for Hidan, power aside. Tsunade can heal through fatal wounds, and Orochimaru can oral rebirth if Hidan curses him, and Jiraiya possibly can be healed by Tsunade if he is cursed as well. It would also be hard to see Jiraiya being cursed considering that Kakashi never was without the help of two Sannin as well. It should be no surprise that this quickly turns into a Sannin versus Kakuzu fight instead of a Sannin versus Akatsuki duo fight. Orochimaru should be able to put a curse mark on Hidan that paralyzes him just like he did against Guru. Even if this doesn't happen, like I said earlier, each Sannin has a way to nullify the effects of being cursed by him, so he's not very relevant in this fight. So this leaves only Kakuzu. It would be a little difficult to say that Kakuzu can win in this situation, considering that he basically lost to Naruto being backed up by Yamato and Kakashi. On the other hand, do these three have the firepower together that can match a Rasen Shuriken? Kakuzu's durability seems to be able to easily withstand the two-tails stomping on him after all. A massive Rasengan from Jiraiya is likely not doing Kakuzu in, since it took a Rasen Shuriken to take him down without his Earth-style heart giving him the ability to harden his skin. Orochimaru doesn't have a big attack for him, and Tsunade's punches would likely severely be nullified. The reason why the Sannin win, though, is that they can bail each other out, just like Kakashi and Yamato did for Naruto. Jiraiya's fire style can combat Kakuzu's ranged jutsus, and Orochimaru's Rashomon gates can as well. If Kakuzu tries to grab one of them, the other two will come in and aid, just like Yamato and Kakashi did. On top of all this, they have a medic in Tsunade. Kakuzu has no path to victory, while all the Sannin can wear him down, while also protecting each other when necessary. They may even have to bring their summons into this fight, but regardless, the Sannin clear the first Akatsuki duo without losing a single member. The next duo for them to take on is the Goth duo in Pain and Conan. For the first scenario, Pain will instantly know the Sannin are in the Leaf Village, so the Sannin won't get much time to investigate where Pain is. Originally, Conan fought Jiraiya first, and when she was swiftly defeated, Nagato made her retreat. I think that was just to gauge Jiraiya's strength, so if all three Sannin appear, I don't think Pain is sending Conan out at all. This also means Pain won't start with just the animal summon. I would estimate that he respects the Sannin enough that he actually starts with all 6 paths here. Sage Mode Jiraiya was worthy of 3 paths, so adding 2 Sannin will likely be so threatening that he just decides to go all in. One key disadvantage for Pain in the Rain Village is that he presumably can't use Planetary Devastation. He wouldn't want to destroy his own village, and if the fight is taken out of the village, the Diva Path likely won't be close enough to Nagato to activate Planetary Devastation. In Nagato's mind, he would be willing to lose and find 6 new paths instead of decimating his own village. But anyway, how does this fight go down exactly? The first aspect I want to cover is how the Sannin do against the lesser paths, since they will need to get through those before facing the Diva Path. The Animal Path's Chameleon Summon will not be that effective this time, since Orochimaru is a sensory type. As for the Dog Summon, that can be restrained once the Sannin learn that it splits like fission. Gamabunta did this by sitting on it when Naruto fought Pain, and in this situation Orochimaru could use a Snake Summon to strangle it as well. After that, the only other offense they have to deal with is the Asura Path, and I think the Sannin are capable of taking that down alone. The problem is that when the paths start working together, specifically when the Diva Path starts getting involved. If the Diva Path pulls a Sannin into the Asura Path's blade, it could be deadly. Luckily, this is not a 1v1 scenario for them though, so the other 2 Sannin could bail the other one out if they get pulled in almost any time. Tsunade could come in and possibly take the hit and regenerate through it, or Jiraiya could do something like throw out a jutsu for suppressive fire. So I don't think Pain's universal pull combo is that deadly early in the fight, but the problem is dealing with the almighty pushes. Pain was able to easily almighty push 3 Toad Summons far out from the center of the Leaf Village, and this instantly defeated them. I don't think this instantly defeats the Sannin, as Tsunade did survive the almighty push that destroyed the Leaf Village, but it is not a good exchange for them at all, considering how easily Pain can do this. Almighty Push will also be very disruptive when it comes to dealing with the other paths too. Anytime the Sannin are on the verge of defeating a lesser path, Pain can push or pull them to totally disrupt it. This means that trying to take the lesser paths out first won't be very efficient, because they will be spending so much time either saving each other or getting damaged from an almighty push. This means that the Diva Path might be better for focusing first, so what can they do in that situation? Trying to take him out with a close range attack while all the other Pains are alive is not going to be feasible. The Asura Path saved the Diva Path from being hit by Kakashi's Chidori, and Naruto had to defeat all the other paths before even getting close to a powerless Diva Path. Tsunade is a close-range fighter, and Orochimaru does not really have any good long-range attacks here. If Jiraiya enters Sage Mode and tries his Auditory Genjutsu, I don't expect that to work because of the Diva Path. It takes a moment to take effect, and if the Diva Path feels threatened, he can just almighty push Jiraiya far away again. The Sannin don't really have any other option when it comes to that strategy, so it looks like they'll have to just slug through the lesser paths in order to have more ways to take on the Diva Path. I do believe that they can defeat all the weaker paths, but by the time they do, they will be quite worn down. Tsunade can brawl well here, Orochimaru himself can physically do well, and Sage Mode Jiraiya can do well both in physically and ninjutsu-wise. They also can bail each other out of universal pulls decently, and withstand almighty pushes okay as well. Tsunade can heal through most physical attacks, Orochimaru can fully regenerate himself, and those two can at least save Jiraiya from some type of universal pull combo. As for the almighty pushes, they will have to take them on the chin, and they can do that just to an extent though, since Tsunade already demonstrated that. By the time they get to that point, though, they will be so worn down from those almighty pushes that I don't think they'll be able to pull off killing the Diva Path. If the Toad summons were defeated with one of these almighty pushes, then how many can the Sannin realistically take here? You also have the problem of Pain potentially using it on 2 of the Sannin, and then taking the remaining one-on-one. Also, anytime the Diva Path feels uncomfortable, he can just do one of these massive almighty pushes to thwart their attack. This is what he did against Kakashi. He was mostly just stalling to find out where Naruto was, but once Kakashi pressured him, he did one massive almighty push and the fight was instantly over. And the Sannin don't have any way to deal with being almighty pushed either. They can bail each other out when being pulled, but being pushed is just a matter of taking it on the chin. So with all that being said, I don't see them winning because they'll be so worn down by the Diva Path's sheer power. The next duo for them to take on is the comrade-killing duo and Itachi and Kisame. Itachi himself is going to be a massive problem for the Sannin altogether. We know that when Orochimaru fought Itachi, he was beat with base Sharingan Genjutsu, despite Orochimaru knowing not to make eye contact. The Sannin are supposed to be all relative, which means that they are all roughly equally vulnerable here. If it was just a simple paralysis Genjutsu, the Sannin could save each other, but since Tsukiyomi is near instant, there's no saving each other from that. We also know he can use at least 2 of these a day, since he used it on both Sasuke and Kakashi. So that is almost an automatic 2 losses for the Sannin. Anytime Itachi feels pressured, he can use this to take out one opponent for sure. And we saw how Orochimaru's Hydra transformation did against Susanoo, and it did not hold up at all. The Totsuka blade was so fast for Orochimaru that he couldn't even register being hit by it until after he had been pierced. So there's 2 surefire win conditions for this duo, and I haven't even mentioned Kisame. Anything threatening the Sannin can do will be shut down by Tsukiyomi, including Jiraiya's auditory Genjutsu. There's not much to say about this fight, based on how we have seen Orochimaru instantly lose against Itachi twice. The other Sannin are supposed to be close in power to Orochimaru, so there's no way they can do much better than him. Even if they try to work together, Itachi is just going to be picking them off one by one, invalidating any of the coordinated efforts that we're trying to make. And Itachi gets Kisame to help him. Itachi has shown that he's well above Sannin tier, so this won't be that hard for him to take on with the help of Kisame. The last duo for them to take on is the artist duo, who I imagine many people watching will think they stand no chance here. Well, at the moment I'm writing this, I haven't thought about who would win. I do believe this will be a tough fight. I get tired of going over this, but both Sasori and Data are some of the most underrated characters when it comes to versus battles. Everyone has heard the debunk about Sasori losing to Sakura and Chio, so I'll be focusing more on explaining why Data is underrated. It seems many gloss over the fact that Data's C3 is implied to cause village levels of destruction. It took Gaara in the desert to contain his explosion, and that is the defense the Sannin combined do not possess. Another thing about him that is often misunderstood is his entire fight against Sasuke. While Obito helping him in the beginning was huge, Sasuke's lightning style and intellect was a far bigger advantage. Oftentimes when Data is put up against another lightning style user, people will just say that their lightning style automatically stops all of Data's explosives, but it's not that simple. Sasuke is one of the smartest fighters in the series, and was only able to deduce that lightning style is Data's weakness after making a whole hypothesis about it. His Sharingan could read Data's earth hand signs, and he knew that some of Data's smallest explosives didn't work early in the fight after being hit by lightning style. Even knowing that, it wasn't like Sasuke was able to disarm any of the large explosives of Data anyway. He only disarmed the nano explosives because his Sharingan could see them, and he had the ability to run electricity through his body to disarm them. The only other people who can do that in the series are the Raikage, and they aren't sensory types like Sasuke. So it was quite literally the worst possible matchup for Data, and he still would have won at the end had he not lost his composure. The only times we see him rage in the series is against the Uchiha, so that even furthers how bad the matchup is for him. On top of all that, Sasuke needed one of the biggest plot holes in the series to survive Data's final explosion. He didn't have enough chakra to use his Sharingan, nor could he run away seconds before the blast, but somehow he summoned Manda, put Manda under Genjutsu, and teleported the both of them to escape the blast. Getting back to the Sannin though, most of this doesn't matter because they can't even use lightning style. I know Orochimaru is said to use all chakra natures, but we've never seen him use lightning style once, so it would be silly to say he can use it to disarm Data's explosives. This means that Data's C4 can't be easily dealt with, and his self-destructing C0 is not easily dealt with either. As for Sasori, he is just as problematic for the Sannin. Based on this scenario, they will have no antidote for his poison, and it is questionable how well the Sannin deal with that. Jiraiya has no resistance, Tsunade might be able to constantly regenerate from the damage, and Orochimaru is questionable when it comes to dealing with it. I see many saying that he has poison resistance, but I can't find where that's stated. Kakashi says that Sasuke is likely resistant to poison now, but that was when Sakura was trying to poison him at the Kage Summit. Sasori's poison is on a whole different level than that. It is possible that Orochimaru can oral rebirth to stop the poison, which I would lean towards working because he's basically creating an entire new body. The last thing I want to mention before getting into the fight is how Sasori and Deidara complement each other very well. When they fought in the war arc, they both took to the air on Deidara's clay bird. Deidara has always been a bit of a glass cannon, but if Sasori were to use his iron sand to protect him, it would be a nightmare to breach their defenses. Not only would you have to deal with Deidara being in the air, you'd have to get past the iron sand as well if you ever want to get close. None of the Sannin can fly, so this will be very problematic for them. I think I've said everything I need to state that shows that this is a close fight, so now I can talk about what actually happens in the fight. At the beginning of the confrontation, I would expect both Sasori and Deidara to understand the gravity of the situation and be ready to be serious. Early in Deidara's fight against Sasuke, he realized Sasuke was too laterally fast for him, so he decided to get on his C2 dragon as a response. This same decision will happen here as well, since they are outnumbered and Deidara prefers to fight in the air anyway. It won't be that hard for both Sasori and Deidara to get in the air since they can just distract the Sannin with their own attacks. Deidara can use some type of explosive, and Sasori has plenty of ways he can use the third Kazekage puppet to distract as well. Once they're in the air, the Sannin's only chance of reaching them is using their summons. Deidara has the ability to fly far above the clouds and at fast speeds, considering that Oniki chased them so far up that his Jonin bodyguard couldn't even follow them. So it's not so much about closing the distance, but instead about deceiving Deidara into a false sense of security, so since he's going to want to be just outside their maximum attack range. The only option the Sannin have for getting in the air is using their summons. Jiraiya has toad summons that can jump far up in the air, and Manda is large enough to at least support them. There are probably some wacky strategies that can be tried, such as toads jumping off each other in the air, or Manda wrapping around a toad and extending towards Deidara and Sasori. There are some ways that the Sannin can close the distance, but Sasori and Deidara aren't going to be sitting still during all of this. When Deidara was fighting Sasuke, he was constantly shooting C2s at him in order to prevent him from even trying to get in the air. These C2s are going to at least wear down the summons over time. These summons are also very large targets for Sasori to poison with his iron sand. We know the inferior gold sand used by Raza could regularly subdue the One-Tails, so what are Manda and Gamabunta going to do here? It is true that Sasori uses way less sand than Raza, but he makes up for it by coating it in poison. Being such big targets will make it easy for Sasori to hit, and possibly even fatally poison any of the summons that jump towards them. Considering that Deidara and Sasori's job description was capturing tail beasts, it would be hard to say that the summons last long here. When Gamabunta took on a suppressed One-Tails in Part 1, he had to rely on Naruto waking Gaara up instead of beating the One-Tails head-on. Even if the Sannin use the summons while they can to get close, so they can use some type of long-range jutsu, none of them should be able to get past the iron sand. This is very important because once those summons are dealt with, the Sannin have no other good options to get in the air. And even if the Sannin get close to the artist do in the air, the iron sand is there as last defense. I know most of this is hypothetical, but it's just hard seeing the Sannin get past both these defenses combined. There are some less viable options they could try that are worth mentioning. Orochimaru extending his neck and blade out like he did against four-tailed Naruto is going to make him too vulnerable. Even if he takes out a wing, that way his neck is completely exposed to any type of counterattack. It could maybe work if the other Sannin cover for him well. If Jiraiya enters Sage Mode and uses Auditory Genjutsu, that could work if Deidara and Sasori are on the ground. It appears to only work at medium range, as pain didn't become disrupted by it until he got closer to Jiraiya. If it was just Deidara, it would be likely they would overwhelm him before he gets in the air, or find a way to get him out of the air. But with Sasori here, his Iron Sand adds an ultimate defense to Deidara's aerial superiority. It just covers Deidara's weaknesses far too well to be dealt with. And even if the Sannin makes something happen here, it's not hard for Deidara to get back in the air. We saw both Sasuke and Gaara get him off his clay bird briefly, and he got back on another before hitting the ground. It'll be even easier to do that here with Sasori covering for him. Sasori is also not the type to go down on the first blow either, since his core can just reassemble its puppet's body, so long as it's not completely destroyed. I've more than proven that the Sannin would have to do a lot just to get past these two defenses, but if you factor in the offenses, the situation becomes even worse. Deidara's C3 would likely not do the trick here, as Orochimaru has Rashomon gates, and Tsunade can use Katsuyu to protect them. Tsunade survived Pain's Leaf Village almighty push after all. The problem for the Sannin is dealing with the nano explosives. Tsunade and Jiraiya are completely vulnerable to it, while Orochimaru may be able to oral rebirth out of it. If the Sannin really push Deidara, this attack will come out, and it is practically guaranteed to take out 2 out of the 3 opponents. As for Sasori, his Iron Sand and Poison only becomes more effective the longer a fight is drawn out. Like I said earlier, Orochimaru may be able to mitigate it, but Tsunade and Jiraiya are vulnerable without an antidote here. The threat of being poisoned is going to persist until they figure out they need to take out Sasori's core. The whole point I'm trying to get out here is that Sasori and Deidara have a few paths to victory here, particularly Deidara's C4 nano explosives. The Sannin do not have a very solid way to get Deidara out of the air, so long as Sasori is protecting him. And even if they're knocked out of the air, they can just become airborne again and have several ways to take out the Sannin. Jiraiya and Tsunade are particularly vulnerable, so if only Orochimaru remains, he will not be able to win a 1v2 scenario. Deidara and Sasori's paths to victory are far better than the Sannin's, so I would have to say I expect the Artist Duo to win despite being outnumbered. Their defenses combine and validate most of the Sannin's offense, and they have viable ways to deal with the Sannin's summons jumping at them. Even a fight solely on the ground would be difficult but winnable for the Sannin, so if you add aerial superiority into the mix, it would make sense why the Artist Duo should win. I'm not saying it's impossible for the Sannin to win, it's just that the ways they could are not nearly as likely as the ways that Deidara and Sasori could. Bottom line is that the summons will not last long enough for the Sannin to get Deidara out of the air, and even if they do, Deidara and Sasori can get back in the air while the summons will likely be defeated by that point. Once that happens, the Sannin have no good way to close the distance, and Sasori and Deidara have several ways to win from there. I imagine this is going to be a very controversial opinion, so I do actually want to hear some actual ways the Sannin can permanently get Deidara out of the air here. After writing all of this, I'm kind of surprised by how bad the Sannin did overall. I'd expected them to beat the Zombie Duo, the Artist Duo, and Pain in the Rain Village. It turns out I'd underestimated how strong Sasori and Deidara's defense are combined, and it became apparent that the Sannin didn't have good ways to get in the air anyway. I would have thought the Diva path would have been more restricted in the Rain Village, but after diving into that fight, it wasn't as bad as I thought. If a casual Almighty Push can take out Jiraiya's summons, and I don't see the Sannin being able to constantly take those hits without being too worn down to fight. Just off the top of my head, I would expect the Sannin to beat the 2 weakest teams out of the 4, but because of the bad matchup against Deidara and Sasori, they're only able to reliably beat one Akatsuki duo. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe if you want to see more videos in the future. Comment something if you have something to say, and thank y'all for watching, I guess I'll see y'all next time.